In our next example, we're going to start off with, again, a much better student reply post. As we read through it, we can see the student challenges the definition provided by the initial student, which is exactly what we're seeking. We see the reply student adds contents and terms, that marketing is the process of developing, implementing, and selling that good or service. See, he says the initial post was a little incomplete. He actually calls out and says, maybe it was incomplete. And then he adds this new idea. That's exactly what we're looking for because that adds greater depth of discussion as he's bringing in relevant content from the text. He also adds a new topic, which is word of mouth. That was not part of the initial post, and we see that in the very end because he says the best marketing out there is word of mouth. Now, in marketing, word of mouth is a key concept. So that's something, again, we're bringing in, or he is bringing in this case, a new concept into the discussion, which is exactly what we're looking for. So this is a good, strong reply post. And from the rubric, we see that it fits the top level criteria of your questions or observations. Add greater depth to the discussion by introducing new ideas. So this would be a reply post that scores very highly. Now for our next example, we need to look at another different initial post. Again, we're not discussing the initial post, but we need to see it to place the reply post in context. As a side note, this is pretty good for an initial post. We see a reasonable definition of marketing, the use of some terms from the text, and a good personal example as assigned. We see that there are clearly places where the student has read the material and provided a good example for us to base then our reply posts on. So as we finish reading up the initial example, we're going to move then to the reply post. And we're going to start off with a passing reply post. Now, this is a passing reply post because it helps move the discussion along, but it doesn't push to a significantly deeper level. There's primarily a restating of what the initial post said, using different terms from the text. This is not really adding new concepts or ideas, but it is providing clarification, which is the third criteria for reply posts, which is one part of the instructions. As we see, it says, nice post. I liked your detailed explanation, and adds here that research and analysis is a big part of marketing. They also bring in target group, which is very close to the correct term, which is target market. So apparently they remembered something from the text and got closer to it. Then they bring in the concepts of needs and wants. Again, this is somebody who's bringing in some additional clarification and some additional ideas from the text into the reply post. Does make an interesting point that would have been interesting to hear the ladies talk more about this, because we did something and here's what happened. So this is a little bit of an anecdotal or personal story to go on and help explain the concepts of the assignment. So the initial post did touch on the concepts, but did not use the vocabulary from the text or from the disciplines, such as target groups and needs and wants. So the reply post correctly and nicely added out by pointing out that missing content and added in those new words and new terms and included the discussion on the importance of research and marketing and in developing and targeting markets. So again, this is an addition to what was said in the initial post. So this reply post definitely gets a passing grade because it does clarify the initial post. It doesn't necessarily get the top grade because it doesn't have every piece there, but it clearly fits at least the middle criteria to the lower end of the top criteria. Now, we're going to look at what's called a low pass or a near with. Sometimes a reply post doesn't exactly hit poor or average or great. Just like all grading, there's a continuum. So to say there's only 3 levels isn't really quite enough. So this one fits actually between the 2 lowest levels. The next reply post then is an example of something between a with and a pass. So let's take a look at it. It starts off by saying, I like the definition you give for marketing. Loyalty is important in marketing. We'll come back to that with term loyalty. Then he talks about some personal experience in Sam's Club, which is, of course, a large, well-known vendor. Now, we do see that one new term for the discipline, loyalty. The actual term is customer loyalty, but it's pretty close for a post in a discussion forum. Now, this is a new concept that was not in the initial post, which is, therefore, adding greater depth to discussion by introducing new ideas. However, the rest of the post really does not add any substance to the discussion. We do see that anecdotal story about Sam's Club, and it's nice to see that and adds a personal touch to the discussion. but there's no direct application of course concepts in the Sam's Club story. So discussion quality is graded on content, not personal opinion or in this case, shopping preferences. We need to be on the watch out for stories without substance because that's what often happens in reply posts. Students talk about something they saw or something they did, but they don't directly connect it and use the applied concepts from the course or the textbook to make it a high point scoring post. So from the rubric, this is in the middle to low side of your observations. Add the discussion by expanding the ideas of others and should be graded accordingly. It's going to be somewhere in the middle of that particular range. Now for our next example, we're moving to another assignment. Here we see the student actually embedded the assignment into the initial post. Now this isn't necessary, and in some ways it could sometimes be classified or thought of as a way to make the initial post look longer, but again, we're talking about reply posts here, not initial posts. We see the assignment is to contemplate 2 instances where you're asked to participate or volunteer to participate in marketing research. They talk about that. The assignment is to describe your reaction, then explain the purpose of the research, and then describe how this research might be used. So we can see as we look through this initial post that the initial post is relatively good and answers the primary issues brought up in the assignment. But what we're going to look for here now is we're going to look at the reply posts. As we come back here, we see that there are a couple of different responses to this particular post I want to look at. First off, we're going to look at a whiff. It's a whiff because as we look through it, it's all anecdotal and does not reference any concept from a marketing text or the marketing discipline. This again could easily be a conversation between some friends discussing whether or not to fill out a survey they got in the mail. See, it says, I liked your example. My son's been out of the hospital several times. Sorry to hear that. And we get a survey every time. Now, this could be just 2 friends talking. Sometimes I fill out, sometimes I just pitch it. Again, there's no marketing concept there. One summer when I saw someone back in the hospital. Again, no concepts there. The comments and ratings do help them implement programs and processes that better the hospital. Now, there's a little bit of something from marketing, but again, not directly related to what we're discussing in the post and not really driving the conversation forward. It kind of repeats what the first person said, doesn't add any new depth to the discussion. And the person goes on to say, sometimes I do them and sometimes I don't. Again, there's nothing wrong at all with students sharing from the personal experiences. In fact, that can add good connection to the course, help build that rapport and relationship. But what we're looking for is the student reply posts have to fit the criteria of evidence of critical thinking, adding greater depth to discussion by introducing new ideas, or providing clarification to classmate questions and insight into discussion. So as a reply post, this is probably the next to lowest section of the rubric on quality because it says in that particular rubric, your questions or observations do not clearly add to the discussion. Again, we're not adding any concepts, we're not adding any depth, so the student may not be appreciative of the grading, but what they wrote, it does not really move the discussion forward. We're looking to add an academic discussion, not a social discussion. We're here to learn concepts of the course and the content, the discipline that your course is in. And that means the additions have to lead to greater understanding and a higher level of the topics and knowledge based on those topics for each particular discussion assignment. Now I'm going to also show a whiff to the same assignment. Again, this next student reply was to a different initial post, but to the same question, so we can use the post above to understand the general nature of what the initial posts are going to be like. Again, the reply post is the focus, and this reply post is a definite whiff because as we look at it, we can see it does not add any new concepts, nor does it demonstrate any critical thinking. It does not make us think at a deeper level. I mean, it starts out, this is really cool. Well, that's all right. Again, that's not necessarily academic language, but these are students and they have a relationship with each other. So I think it's smart in getting unbiased opinions from employees instead of outsourcing it. Well, that's about the most academic comment made in this particular post. And then the person goes on to talk about Bing over Google, which again is really more of a personal, subjective opinion than anything referenced or foundation or laid in the marketing textbook for this particular assignment. If anything, this post could be in the lowest category in the quality area because it focuses on non-relevant issues, which is Google versus Bing. Now, you might be fooled into thinking the student is bringing in a good You might be fooled into thinking the student is bringing in a good concept in terms of collecting unbiased opinions, except the student even admits that this is not a new idea because the student wrote, "I also think the company is smart." So what the student's doing is repeating the initial post, which is not new material, so this is a whiff.